and welcome back to a new episode of True Crime Finding Closure. To those who are watching for the very first time, welcome, welcome. And to those who are coming back, welcome back. My name is Juliana.
I'm Barb.
And we want to thank all of you guys out there for all your support, encouragement, and stuff. Again, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. This will help us continue to be able to bring you more true crime stories in the future. Today, we're kind of changing things up a little bit. Normally, we've been doing a lot of missing person cases. Today, we're doing a homicide. 4, in fact. And it's a case that was brought to my attention. I'd heard about it, but never really dug into it because I thought, like everybody else in Austin, I thought it was solved. But it was brought to my attention by my loving niece, Hannah. She said, "Hey, Aunt Julie, you got to do this. You got to look at this case. This is, something you got to check out." And so I'm like, "Oh, okay. I thought it was solved, but I'll look." And sure enough, it was not solved. And I'm like, "Okay, so we'll do it." So, Hannah, we're doing this for you. So thank you for saying hey to do this. And on a fun note with her, she just newly got married, and her new husband and stuff, who wasn't really a true crime person, at all, has now joined the ranks of true crime lovers. So he's, it runs in the family. So this is for you guys, Colton and Hannah. Thank you again for offering this suggestion, and hopefully we'll do you justice, and hopefully we'll bring justice to the families and the victims out there. So let's get started, shall we?
Okay.
This week we delve into the mysterious murders that took place more than 3 decades ago. 4 teenage girls were brutally murdered here in a I can't believe it's frozen yogurt shop here in Austin, Texas. This case will forever be known as the Austin yogurt shop murders. Firefighters thought they were responding to a fire at a frozen yogurt shop on December night in 1991, but then saw 4 bodies, 4 young girls charred beyond recognition, in a fire meant to cover up evidence in a quadruple homicide. The horrific crime has haunted families, the city, and the investigators who chased every lead, every tip to dead end, and left a very, very big mark on the city. So here is this hauntingly terrifying story that we were going to be presenting to you today. Again, I'm not originally from Austin. I'm actually from Colorado. So when I came down here, I'd heard about it. I saw things and stuff, but never knew much about it. It was kind of one of those legendary type stories you hear, but never knew a lot about. And Barb will go into that more here in a little bit. The 1991 yogurt shop killings are an unsolved quadruple homicide, which took place at an I can't believe it's yogurt shop in Austin, Texas, United States, on Friday, December the 6th, 1991. The victims were 4 teenage girls, a 13-year-old Amy Ayers, 17-year-old Eliza Thomas, 17-year-old Jennifer Harbinson, and Jennifer's 15-year-old sister Sarah Harbinson. Jennifer and Eliza were employees of the ice cream shop, or frozen yogurt shop, while Sarah and her friend Amy were in the shop to get a ride home with Jennifer after the shop closed at 11 p.m. Now, for those of you who do not know Austin, Anderson Lane is not a major highway, and it's actually not an interstate. But it is a major thoroughfare that goes east to west, in the northern part of Austin. And on this street, there are a lot of restaurants, coffee shops. There's a mall there that had a skating rink at the time, movie theater. I mean, there were a lot of things and activities for young people to do. And then, of course, the yogurt shop and multiple fast food restaurants and stuff. So that night, her friend, Sarah, and her friend Amy actually had been... reports say had been at the skating rink, which is in North Cross Mall, which was a couple blocks from where the crime took place, skating and hanging out with friends like kids do on a Friday night, and had walked down to the yogurt shop to meet with her sister to get the ride home. And they were going to go have a slumber party at the Harbinson's house that evening. So it was a planned event, end of the night, Friday night, right before the holidays. It was that kind of thing. So approximately 1 hour before closing time, a man who had tried to hustle customers in his queue was permitted to use the toilet in the back. the store did not have a public restroom. They only had the restroom for the employees in the back. And apparently this guy made enough of a fuss saying, I need to go to the bathroom or whatever. They let him use the employee bathroom. And he was back. Not only did the two girls who worked there, along with the two younger girls and any of the other customers that were there, all kind of noticed, this guy is taking quite a bit of time doing whatever it is he's needing to do. And granted, no one's telling him, oh, you can only be in the bathroom for like 5 minutes. Nothing like that. But it was an abnormally longer time than what you would typically think someone would take in the bathroom. So they thought maybe that he might have jammed the rear door open and was prepping and setting up for the crime that was going to happen a little bit later. The couple who left the shop just before 11 p.m. when Jennifer locked the front door to prevent more customers from entering reported seeing two men at a table acting suspicious, conspiring, odd. How would you say it, Barb?
Well, they were kind of somber and not talking. Where usually people who are, yoga shop, they're talking to each other. These guys are very serious,
quiet,
focused,
very antisocial. That was the word I was trying to figure
there you
out. Very antisocial in an environment where it's supposed to be very sociably. Because you're in a frozen yogurt shop. You're supposed to be talking and having a good time. They were not, apparently. Or planning the events that will eventually transpire later on. It was around midnight when a police officer reported a fire in the shop. And the first responders discovered the bodies inside. The victims had been shot in the head. At least one of them had been raped with a 22 and a 38 pistol were used to commit the murders. The perpetrator probably exited through the back door, which was then found unlocked. It was like they had set up the whole path to do what they were going to do. The organized method of the operation, the ability to control the victims, and the destruction of evidence by arson pointed to an adult experienced in the crime rather than the teenagers, according to one of the original detectives on the case. And that's something I fully believe. The behavior and the forensics part of this crime, I cannot see teenage boys doing something like this. I just can't. It's... Could they do it if they were a psychopath or a sociopath or had mental issues? Possibly. But 4 teenage boys controlling 4 girls, I don't see it.
Yeah, and the guys who they described, the ones that were, they were seated in the booth right next to the cash register, were intimidating looking. And that would be the only way
likely.
Be more likely.
Just the organization of it all. I mean, for someone to be able to think of every step and to be able to handle any kind of changes that the steps, because not every crime is going to go off exactly how you plan it.
Right.
And for them to be able to alter the things they had to when they needed to, a teenager doesn't have that cognitive ability to do it.
Or the experience to do it.
Okay,
let's do this,
most teenagers, I have a teenage son, are like, screw it, I give up, we'll just do it this way and make a mess out of it. They don't take the time and the effort to make sure it's done correctly. So that's just my opinion as a behavioral analyst. That it doesn't fit. Every time I'd heard about it, it just didn't fit to me. But it is what it is. The Austin Police Department has DNA from an unknown male as a result of one of the rapes. And a Y chromosome match for the perpetrator DNA was found in the research database of a Federal Bureau of Investigation, but it was declined to reveal the identity of the man in accordance to the laws of anonymity for donors. And because thousands of men could bear the fragment of this type of DNA, which is unable to identify the individuals. So because of the laws they have for anonymity, it kind of came to a situation where,
Yeah, it's not like it's going to point to that guy.
That guy, exactly. Shortly before midnight on Friday, December 6, 1991, it was a patrolman who actually saw the fire coming out of the shop. And at that time of night, they thought, nobody was going to be there because it's late at night. The stores are already closed. So they thought it was just a fire. They didn't know more was held inside until after the fire was put out. He reported it to his dispatcher. After the fire was extinguished, firefighters discovered 4 new bodies. And I have to elaborate just a little bit on this one. The firefighters discovered 2 of the bodies in the back part of the store. They discovered 1 in the front of the store, or near the front of the store. And it was not until earlier in the morning when the sun came up that they found the 4th and final body. Because of all the debris and the soot. And people are like, well, how come they didn't see the one? They're all right there. And I'm like, it's midnight. It's dark. There's debris coming from the ceiling.
Yeah, the ceiling tiles and stuff, and the water would have soaked those, and then they'd just be a soggy mess down there. And the fire had charred the bodies, so they just blended in with the charred everything
and then they
else.
As they were coming in from the back door, they had their stuff that was leaning up against the back door. So when they were shoving it open, that all stuff kind of toppled. And as people who know firefighters, they're moving things around too as they're trying to put the fire out. So it wasn't until things settled down they started digging through the debris that they found the bodies, and then eventually found the 4th body earlier the next morning when they had a little bit more light. Because again, it's dark. After the fire hit, there was no electricity. They had only the lights on their uniforms and flashlights, which in a dark, sooted, soggy, wet mess, you can't really tell what you're looking at.
Yeah, it was long after they closed, so they weren't expecting to find anybody in there.
Exactly. So, each of the girls had been shot in the head execution style with a .22 caliber lead bullet. Sarah's hands had been bound with a pair of panties. She also had been gagged and raped. Jennifer was not bound, but her hands were behind her back, like they were getting ready to bound her, and then something happened. Maybe that was at the point when they were binding them that they saw that the other girl had gotten away and went to shoot her, and so forget this. It's just
maybe whatever was holding her burned off.
We don't know. Again, it's all speculation. We don't really know. Liza had been gagged, and her hands were also tied behind her back. All 3 girls had been severely charred and shot in the back of the head. Well, unlike the others, Amy's body was found in a separate part of the shop. She was not charred, but had received 2nd and very early 3rd-degree burns on 25 to 30% of her body. She was found with a sock-like cloth around her neck. She was shot as the same as the others. However, the bullet had missed her brain. She also had a second bullet that was caused severe damage to her brain, exiting through the lateral cheek and jawline. Barb can explain a little bit about the brain thing.
I know somebody who was shot with a .22, and because of the angle, it didn't penetrate the skull, but it just skated along the surface of the skull under the skin. And that's what happened with her. She was able to, it's painful, but she probably just crawled away. And when they saw that, they finished her off with the .38, which did the damage.
And it ultimately took her life.
Yeah.
This is, again, a lot of this is just speculation based on the evidence at hand. What really happened, we may never know until we find out who actually did it.
Yeah.
But this is just based on where the bodies were lying. But again, it's hard to tell because the bodies were shuffled here and there because of the firefighters going in and trying to put out the fire, which was, we all speculate, was started to hide the evidence.
Yeah.
So, we don't know. Initial investigations had produced a large number of persons of interest. Among them was a 15-year-old caught with a .22, not established to be the murder weapon, in a nearby mall, North Cross Mall, days after the killings. Although he initially was promising information, after tough questioning, the detectives decided he was trying to get himself out of the gun charge and eliminated him and his 3 petty criminal friends and that whom he had implicated, none of whom were older than 17 at the time. The two older girls, Eliza and Jennifer, worked at the shop, while the younger victims, Sarah and Amy, were at the business waiting for ride home after the store closed at 11. Again, they were coming from the ice skating rink in the North Cross Mall, and we're coming there, and it was the end of the night. The girls were cleaning up. Everything was, business as usual. Retired officer John Jones, who's now 70 years old, recalled that what he saw when he responded to the report of the girl's murder that night. We hadn't had one that I knew of like that. Multiple bodies, fire, gunshot wounds, probable robbery, which turned out not to be robbery because all the money was still there. He said in an interview for KView, and KView is a news channel down here in Texas, in Austin area. It was a pretty overwhelming scene. There were firemen everywhere, water was everywhere, debris was everywhere. I mean, it was literally chaos. And then they find 4 bodies, which even adds another dimension of chaos to an already chaotic scene, as you can probably imagine. It was crazy. I've been on, I've seen crime scenes and how they run. And I'm like, sheesh, and these are just the ones I've seen were like petty crime stuff. But I can only imagine, with a fire included in that gives it a completely different dimension and to look at than, what you would probably, and then they find the bodies and
execution style.
And execution style.
Oh no, the evidence is washed away.
Yeah, it's just, it kind of, well, crap.
Yeah.
It's kind of that, and sheer panic sets in because they're like, wonderful, we have 4 dead bodies, victims here who are executed or murdered. And looking at the crime scene, they're like,
yeah,
well, we don't really have a crime scene. The crime scene is underwater, under soot, under all the. I mean, it was literally that kind of mentality was going on. According to Jones, the fire was centered in the back part of the yogurt shop, where the bodies were found, and smoke and soot-covered surfaces, destroying potential forensic evidence. Spent rounds from 2 different types of guns, a 38 and a 22, were recovered, as well as a very small sample of DNA from an unidentified male. Police launched an in-depth investigation into the killings, and they followed up on thousands of tips, leads as the years ticked by. I mean, they were working hard on this. They were looking on every possible lead, tip, idea, everything, and nothing would turn out. But primarily it focused on 4 boys, which we'll both get into a little bit later here. This case continues to haunt Texas and Austin, and everyone who lives in Austin all had theories and tips about what happened and who could have done it. Public opinion, fear, paranoia on this case, and rumors almost made this case an urban legend. Everyone who knew about it or heard about it, but there was other things that caused it to go into other proportions in the stratosphere of, which Barb will get into. So Barb, take it away.
Austin, Texas, December 1991. You couldn't go far without seeing that billboard with the 4 black and white photos of the girls and a red banner reading, "Who killed these girls?" Over the next 6 weeks after the murders, everyone was paranoid. Parents worried about their teenagers' jobs. Were they safe working at insert any fast food place name here, or etc. Already existing age laws, such as no one under 18 closes alone, were now more enforced.
And night managers were put into.
Night managers, stuff like that. They didn't have to be working out front. They could be in the office.
But nobody under the age of 17 or under the age, actually 21, somebody had to be 21 years old or older, be there while closing, and no person 17 years or younger could be there by themselves without an adult.
Yeah. Austin Police Department was under enormous pressure from the girls' parents, the public, the state, up to including the U.S. president calling for results. This was nationwide, heard about it. Unfortunately, that meant they were also swamped with over 550,000 new tips and sightings in and around the neighborhood near the crime scene and up and down Anderson Lane itself. Mostly they were false tips about some guy walking around after dark or standing around, could be waiting for their girlfriend to get off work. It was a lot of that. For several months after the murders, no man could walk or be alone after dark on Anderson Lane without the cops getting a tip or a cop pulling over to ask questions. There was sheer panic and fear around that area and on Anderson Lane.
I mean, it was insane. Did not live here at the time this crime happened, but going back and looking at the police reports and the newspapers and the police headlines and banners and stuff and things like that, it was like, good Lord! It was like, my husband Robert was out front of North Cross Mall, which is a couple blocks from where the crime took place, and he was out there. They had been at some record or movie store or whatever in the North Cross Mall and with his buddy, and they were out in the parking lot just getting ready to park the ways for the night, and we're chit-chatting, about Star Wars or whatever, and a cop came over and kind of flashed the flashlight at him, like, what are you doing? And we're just talking. I mean, it was ridiculous, and that paranoia and that pressure that was put on the police can cause and did unfortunately cause a lot of mistakes and a lot of errors and a lot of false information and false leads to happen.
Yeah, rushed investigations, and that's how you make mistakes.
Try to get results. So people out there, I respect that you're wanting your cases to be solved, but try, the police have a little bit limited time to investigate as it is. Please try not to pressure. I know it's hard, I know it's difficult, and you want to do that, but there's a time and a place to pressure, and there's a time and place not to. When the case is fresh and new, give them time. If it's been a year, okay, maybe then you put a little bit of pressure on, but
Really,
give them some room to breathe.
APD had 4 teenage boys that they were sure were the culprits. Juliana will cover this, but many had felt they concentrated on just these guys too much and no one else. Years later, many people thought the murders were solved because they recalled the trials. They missed the release of the 2 young men after the ruling of rights violations. I was horrified watching the interrogation on a documentary with the blatant coaching and coercion. They had films of it. I hope that cop was fired because everyone thought it was solved. The case entered urban legends type status or had a Mandela effect to it. When people would find out that it wasn't solved, they were like, yes, it was. I remember all that. And there was lots of confusion and misinformation, which is what gave the case its mystique, etc.
But yes, I was hearing a lot about it. I heard it from you and a lot of people that it was just, people were, well, yeah, it was, and well, no, it wasn't. Like, well, I know, I remember seeing it, and then you look it up, and well, it's not. So it's that kind of Mandela feel or vibe to it, and it had, the urban legend type status where it's, you hear about it, but did it really happen? I mean, it kind of got that and all that confusion and the misinformation. Was it solved? Wasn't it? It just added to the hysteria, the mystique of it. So,
regarding the partial DNA profile, someone explained it only had 16 markers, which is not a lot of genetic material. It's enough to eliminate, but not enough to incriminate. The prevailing public opinion is and was too much concentration on the 4 boys, which meant they weren't even looking elsewhere. DNA eliminated the 4 boys. They were not them. I remember this at the time. I never thought those 4 would do it or had the ability to do something like this. It looked professional. All 4 girls were shot execution style, and the whole crime was just too well planned out. The fire, which destroyed a lot of the evidence, the soot-covered fingerprints, perfectly planned way to remove evidence and impede the investigation. It was dark, smoky, after midnight, and the fire was out before they even discovered the bodies. Some have speculated that it might be more of like a warning or a message to someone, like the owner, who happened to have a long criminal record and had association with some unscrupulous individual characters. The killers may have only meant to target the 2 girls working there. but the other girls who were visiting and getting rides home were included because they had to get rid of any witnesses, which making it a horrible scene even more tragic. The two guys lingering in a booth while they were preparing to close are my guess. As they looked intimidating and suspicious, the 4 teenage boys arrested weren't smart, scary, or big. One attorney stated that the girls were strong, outdoorsy, think future farmers of America, and probably would have laughed at any aggression from these 4 teenagers and told them to go to hell if not just kick their butts. The original investigator, John Jones, said of one of the guys, he had no clue. He couldn't organize a 2-car parade. I love that. But, it's just, they were kids.
They don't have the cognitive ability to do something like that. It just, they're teenagers. They can do a lot. I mean, a lot of teenagers think they can do more than they actually truly cognitively can. I mean, the scene was gruesome. It was horrible. And
the idea that that 4 teenage boys and these 4 girls in that back room, it wasn't that big. So, I'd read that about it just seemed like that would have been a cluster.
Well, something that leads me to believe, and I didn't really think about it until just recently, that Jennifer locked the door. Mm-hmm. And the only 2 people that were inside
were those 2 guys
in the corner. So the 4 teenage boys weren't there.
Yeah.
How, if it was somebody else, how would they have gotten in unless they knew that the back door was going to be open?
That's true. That's true. Because she only locked it to keep more people from coming in. Mm-hmm. And it's too bad that they weren't a little more, say, hey, come on, guys, we're closing. When you start putting chairs on the table, which is what they were doing, and these guys were still sitting there.
See, and that's where a manager would have stepped in and said, okay, guys, you need to get out. But being a teenage girl, with 2 unscrupulous characters who are kind of nefarious looking and intimidating, you may not, be kind of a little sluggish and just kind of like, oh, come on.
The chairs should have been a hint.
Trying to do things and, hoping and fingers crossing, toes crossing, and that these 2 characters will leave or want to ask to leave, and they weren't apparently leaving. So for me as a behavioral analyst, I have to agree with Barb that it looks like it has to be those 2 individuals.
Yeah. There was a great 30th anniversary documentary 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now. I had forgotten so much of the details, but it fired up the forums too. With new legislation, the Homicide Victims Families Rights Act, there's a mouthful, this case went to the top again. DNA samples are meeting the newer technology. People are talking about the case, and new to Austin folks are getting caught up on what they only thought was legend or, all that. But maybe the family can get closure if the DNA stuff starts
and the fact
start
that
getting results.
Us doing this show, and the fact that it's coming back into the media from the documentaries that are coming out now and various other outlets, that maybe it might entice somebody to remember something that they didn't think of that night. Because again, we have said in past episodes, if you were in that parking lot, there are a lot of shops that were in that parking lot. And if you saw somebody going in or something going out or there's something suspicious that you may have not thought about, you just may have seen somebody and you just kind of, it's late at night, it's 11 o'clock, you want to go home, you're not really paying attention, but something out of the corner of your eye, you may have seen something. Yeah. That may be the answer. That may be the person who did this or persons. So, just know about that. I'm really glad it's coming back in there, that maybe.
I just remember something about the first, the cop who saw the fire. First, he was on patrol. I read somewhere that he had a news crew riding along with him. They were doing an article on crime in the area. So
talk about apropos.
Yeah, and they got an exclusive because they were there, right there. So it's not like later on, the news heard it and they started. These guys were right on site.
I mean, it was
So,
lucky.
yeah. So, I thought I'd forgotten that I'd read about that, but with it back in the news and back in the discussions, Reddit was all fired up again.
DNA,
Yeah,
the
the
DNA
DNA stuff.
technology stuff, so much
Yeah.
better than it was in 91.
Yeah. So the yeah, and the DNA was the only evidence that in this case was protected because it was inside.
Her.
Yeah. So it didn't get destroyed. And that's the
It's
only thing that,
bittersweet that, it's bitter because it had to happen, but it's sweet because we have evidence that we can probably find the perpetrator who did
Yeah,
it.
hopefully.
It's, not, I don't condone rape at all,
Mhm.
I'm going to make that known. But in this case, because she was, it left evidence inside.
that was a little bit protected.
Yeah.
But so hopefully that DNA will come through, and then that family can finally get closure. But back to Juliana for the rest of the story.
Thank you, Barb. As you can see, the paranoia and the fear that revolved around this case really, really did a number. It hampered a lot of it. It impeded a lot of it, and it caused the cops to probably do things they maybe, and I hope, probably wouldn't do had they not been pressured by everybody. Every form of government possible was pressuring them, from the mayor, like she said,
Yeah.
the governor, the United States of America president was saying, hey, this needs to be solved. So, but the police ultimately centered their investigation around 4 teenage boys: Maurice Pierce, Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, and Forrest Welburn, detaining and questioning them on and off for years. And within days of the killing, Pierce had been found at a nearby mall, again, North Cross Mall, with a gun matching a caliber used at the crime scene. Several years later, a new detective on the case theorized that the 4 teens from 1991 were credible suspects. By that time, they were in their 20s. By that time, the young boys, who are now in their 20s, in a string of interrogations conducted by various detectives, confessions were obtained from some of the suspects. They said all 4, Robert, Michael, Maurice, and Forrest, had participated in the murder. And something that I forgot to mention earlier, these 4 boys had been in the yogurt shop. They were seen by several people in the yogurt shop, and they're teenagers. They're causing a little bit of mischief, but doing what teenage boys do. But they had left the coffee shop, and from certain reports, they had stolen a car from somewhere else and took off. They don't.
I think they were heading to San Antonio.
Yeah, San Antonio or something like that. So they really didn't. That should have been an alibi.
Yeah.
Why the police didn't look at that as an alibi and use them as, I would say, scapegoats in this case?
Yeah.
I don't know. But I'm like, they were in a car on the way to San Antonio. How can they be at a yogurt shop murdering 4 girls at midnight when they already took the car? Because they had physical evidence that these boys took this car and were on the way down to San Antonio at the time that these were done.
Yeah.
Help me out. It didn't just. That doesn't make sense. But the only connection these 4 boys had was the fact that they were in that yogurt shop earlier in the evening, seen by several of the people who were lost, people that were in there, and causing a little bit of mischief.
They were, in case anybody was wondering, through the credit card receipts, they were able to contact people who had been there. Now, anybody paid cash, they weren't able to track them, but they were able to call these people as witnesses to see if they'd seen anything. So that's how they had witnesses, being that after it was long closed.
Yeah. No record was kept of what was said to the men in the 1991 interrogations, making it impossible to know whether the detectives had supplied information to the suspects in the initial interrogations. Such information could be used to implicate the suspects in later interrogations, if they were to reference it. But they didn't have it, so it kind of added a conflict there. 2 of the 4 men were sent to trial entirely due to their self-incriminating statements. The prosecution went into great detail about the horrific nature of the crimes against these young victims, but presented no hard evidence other than the confessions. So essentially, they had no evidence except for the confessions that majority of people think were coerced.
The video on that documentary was they stood over there screaming at the guy, supposedly for 22 hours. And the only way, telling him that the only way that it was going to stop is if he confessed.
Yeah. Me as a person, I wanted to reach to the video and do a little bit of smack into the cop, but like, come on, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But
supposedly he held at one point he held a gun to his head and was doing that screaming and saying, confess. It's like, oh my God.
The prosecution, again, would go into great detail. But they presented no hard evidence other than those confessions.
Yeah.
The two were convicted, one being sentenced to death and the other sentenced to life because he was 15 at the time of the murders. However, the prosecution's tactic of using excerpts from each of the alleged confessions at the other's trial was ruled to have violated the Confrontation Clause. Because the co-defendants was not testifying. Both convictions were overturned on the Confrontation Clause alone, and the men were freed in 2009. And what that Confrontation Clause means is that, in other words, you have a right to face your accuser, and they weren't allowed to do that. And it's like, wait a minute, they weren't allowed to face it. This person's accusing it. This person wasn't testifying. Yeah. So it added there's a lot of loopholes that were caused because of that Confrontation Clause. The prosecution insisted that they would be retried. However, forensic investigation showed that the DNA found in the victim was not theirs, nor was it that of any of the other two that were implicated as well in their confessions. The prosecution consequently abandoned plans for a retrial. Texas courts later decided that those released were not entitled to compensation as they had not proven that they did not commit the crime. In other words, we're not going to pay you for all the hardships you did because we still haven't proved whether or not you did it. So you're still a person of interest. You're not getting money from us, in other words. But one of the detectives in the interrogation, Hector Polanco, which is the one that Barb was telling about, and the one that I would love to smack around a little bit, for what he's done, was accused of coercing false confessions in a previous notorious case here in Austin involving an exonerated defendants, Christopher O'Connor and Richard Danziger. Both were released after 13 years of being in prison. Two innocent individuals that were put in prison because of this cop's technique or tactic. Danziger was assaulted in prison, which resulted in permanent brain damage. 7 jurors from the trials have stated that they wouldn't have convicted Scott and Springsteen from the 2 of the 4 of the individuals thought to have committed the murders had the evidence that this guy was an abusive cop and had done this in the past been available at the time of the trial. So now when things like that happen, they have to go back and reevaluate. They have to do a retrial sometimes depending on the situation. When the said cop or investigator or therapist or psychologist or whatever has a history of having certain behaviors. At the time of the killings, a known serial killer, Kenneth McDuff, was also in the area. He had a history of multiple murders involving young teenage girls. But he was also soon ruled out, and he was also executed on November 17th, 1998 for unrelated crimes to these murders. By 1999, 3 of the boys, now men, had confessed to the murders over the years. Scott was placed on death row in 2001, and Springsteen was sentenced to life behind bars a year later. But the convictions didn't hold. The Texas Court of Appeals ruled that the men should have been given a chance to cross-examine each other. In other words, facing your accuser. Because one was saying this, the other was saying that, and in a court of law, they have a right to face your accusers and say, no, I didn't do that. I did this, or whatever the situation is. And that didn't happen in this particular trial or case. There were other problems with the case. A detective, in this case Hector Polanco, held a gun to Scott's head during his pivotal multi-day interrogation, 22 hours. or plus. Another detective admitted to withholding key information for more than a year that all but ruled out Pierce's gun as the murder weapon. Investigators dredged the Colorado River, also known as Lake Austin or Lake Travis, looking for another gun supposedly dumped there almost a decade earlier, but never did find it. Later, now here with new and improved DNA, tests came back without any matches to Scott and Springsteen were then released on bond in June in 2009, and all charges were dismissed. In other words, the DNA came back saying, you didn't do it, you didn't do it, you didn't do it, and you didn't do it. See ya! But we still have the DNA of an unidentified male, which we're still trying to figure out who did it, or who that person is. Austin police admit that over 50 people, including McDuff, on the day of his execution, had confessed to the yogurt shop murders. A confession in 1992 by two Mexican nationals held by Mexican authorities was soon disputed and finally ruled false. I mean, they said, yes, we did it, because the two individuals that were in the corner that we think doing it looked in the posters, the wanted posters, looked Hispanic. So, I mean, it looked like these two. They did have some similarities, but ultimately it was ruled out that it wasn't them. But they were, because in Mexico they were kept for quite a while to admit that. In 2006, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals overturned Robert Springsteen's conviction on the basis of an unfair trial. The U.S. Supreme Court refused to reinstate the conviction in February of 2007. By 1999, three of the boys, now men, had confessed. Again, one was sentenced to life, one was placed, but they didn't hold, and they were kicked to the curb, saying, "Nope, you're out of here." The Texas Courts of Appeal ruled the men should have been given the chance to cross-examine. On August 20th, 2008, the defense lawyers, Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen, requested DNA testing for alternative suspects. No matches against evidences discovered earlier that year were ever found. 7 jurors from the trial stated they would have not convicted these men had that as well, if that evidence had been shown, that the DNA had shown that they hadn't been there.
Yeah.
So not only the rough cop, but DNA. So it kind of was screaming for a mistrial there.
Yeah.
On Wednesday, June 24th, 2009, Judge Mike Lynch ruled in response to Travis County District Attorney Rosemary Lindbergh requests that one of the trials be continued, that defendants Springsteen and Scott be freed on bond pending their upcoming trials. At 2:50 p.m. that day, they both walked out of the Travis County Jail with their attorneys as free men. Later that day, Lindbergh responded to Lynch's decision with the following statement. Today, I requested a continuance in the case of Michael Scott, a defendant in the yogurt shop murders, whose trial was scheduled to begin on July 6th. Judge Lynch granted that motion, but also released both Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen on a personal bond, as he indicated that he would do in his previous scheduling order. Requesting a delay in this case was a difficult decision, but one that I believe is best course of action towards the ultimate successful prosecution in this important matter. Which ultimately, in turn, that by the time that the DNA came back and other evidence presented itself, proving they were innocent. Knowing that Judge Lynch would release both defendants, the police and FBI requested certain conditions on their bond, requiring them to remain in Travis County and to report to the court any change of residence, to have no contact with the victims' families or the witnesses, that they not carry weapons or consume any alcohol or any illegal drugs, that they would report to court on a routine basis and attend all court appearances. Both Springsteen and Scott were convicted by juries in 2001 and June of 2001 and September of 2002. Their convictions were overturned by an appeal court, but their statements to law enforcement were found to be voluntarily given. Since the original trial of these two men, new developments in DNA technology have become available. As they prepared for retrial in March of 2008, they submitted various evidentiary items for what we call YSTR testing. Basically, it's another form of DNA testing. The test looks for male DNA only and is deemed to be the most accurate test for samples that are mixtures of male and female DNA. Because obviously it was inside of her that her DNA was in there as well. As in this case, we sought this testing because we have ongoing duty and responsibility to use the most up-to-date science available to seek the truth in this and all cases that they prosecute. Currently, it is clear the evidence in the death of these 4 young women include DNA from one male whose identity is yet known to us. The defense asserts that the testing reveals more than one unknown male, so they ended up finding actually 2 unknown males, which would match the 2 we saw in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
Woohoo! We're getting somewhere. We hope. But the evidence presented in the hearing on Thursday, June 18th, contradicts that notion. The reliable scientific evidence in that case presents one and only one unknown male donor. There's a lot of people who argue that there's 2, so it's still in a flux. Given that investigators and lawyers could not, in good conscience, allow the case to go to trial before the identity of this male donor is determined. The full truth is known. Police remain confident that both Springsteen and Scott are somehow responsible for the deaths in the yogurt shop. But it would not be prudent to risk a trial until we know the nature of the involvement of this unknown male or males. So, we shall see. We shall see about, what happens. You never know. I mean, we have to see if we can find out who that did it. Maybe we can shed some light on it, and maybe we can really show that they really did do it. Or yes, they're the ones that kind of were distraction and distracted while he went to the back and opened the door. Because at the time, the man that was waiting, that went to the bathroom and took forever and stuff, that was when the boys were acting up and causing distraction. They could be just.
It was.
It was the same time. So they could have been used as a distraction, and once their deed was done, they left, and it allowed the other 2 to proceed on with the crime. So you never know. I mean, there's so many different kinds of speculation. But we don't know. And hopefully, maybe one day we will find out. Maybe one day we will find out whose DNA that belongs to. The Austin Police Department remains committed to these cases and trying to solve this and to find out who truly did it and to be able to bring some answers to this. Their further investigation will continue to be a priority, and it's their commitment to the victims, their families, and the community. And they will not give up until all people responsible for the terrible and tragic murders are brought to justice. In October 28th, 2009, all charges were dismissed against Scott and Springsteen. On December 23rd, 2010, Austin police officer Frank Wilson and his rookie partner Bradley Smith conducted a traffic stop on a vehicle driven by Maurice Pierce in the northern part of the city. After a brief foot pursuit, Pierce struggled with Wilson before removing a knife from his belt and stabbing Wilson in the neck. But Wilson, who survived his injuries, subsequently pulled out his gun and shot and killed Pierce. So it was a brutal brawl. On December 8th, 2021, the House Judiciary Committee passed legislation from Representative Michael McCall, giving the families of cold case victims the opportunity to petition the federal government to re-examine cases older than 3 years. On February 5th, 2022, it was announced that advanced DNA technology was bringing investigators closer than ever to solving the crime. Now, stepping back a little bit, while I agree to some extent about the giving families, cold case victims a little bit more to be able to petition, it's kind of a double-edged blade in a way, because a lot of times families and victims and of lost loved ones are desperate for any kind of answers. And even when there's nothing evidence to go on, there's no new tips, no nothing, they're still trying to go reevaluate. Like, we've done that. We've run the test. We've done everything up to date. We keep doing that, and there's nothing more to do. And the families just don't want to give up. And I understand that, but I think the law is a good law, but I think that they need to put in some specifications in there,
Guidelines too.
guidelines in certain situations and stuff, because otherwise it's going to be a cluster, and it's already presenting that way in some extent. I know that the Attorney General's office here in Texas has a cold case unit, and a lot of the like the case they're going to be doing next time, is in there as well as this case. And a lot of the people are like, well, we need to have this, we need to do this, we need, wanting all the highest technology possible, and sometimes that's just not possible. um, because it's not available, or it's not in this state, it's in Quantico, Virginia, or it's in New York City, or it's not here, and it takes time. And a lot of times people don't understand that we're not a television show. We can't solve a crime in an hour. Sometimes it takes longer. We can't run DNA and get it back in 2 days. It takes 6 months to a year sometimes to get DNA or toxicology reports back. So that law needs to have some editing to it.
Yeah, because unfortunately, it's giving a false impression that if we
petition and do this, and they have to do that.
Happen. It'll happen real quick.
Well, if it's already done, there's nothing more to do. It causes a situation. On August 3rd, 2022, President Joe Biden signed the Homicide Victims Family Rights Act, and that's the act that we we're just talking about, into law. It was actually Michael McCall who's the one that suggested it, and it was Joe Biden who actually signed it into law, which was motivated by the yogurt shop murders. The law is intended to help ensure that federal law enforcement reviews cold case files and applies the latest technologies and the scientific standards of the time, or investigative standards at the current time. Logistics are not clear in the bill. However, it does state that a request can be made for cold cases to be reviewed by federal agencies. So it did, like I said, when it first was presented, there was a lot of, well, no, we can't do this, or this needs to be changed. So before it became a law, there's some of the things were added in, and some of those things that we were just talking about were added in. There's still some need for some more, and they're still trying to like with everything, there are some growing pains, and they're still trying to figure it out.
Finesse the wording.
Finesse it a little bit, make it pretty. The murders were also a subject of Beverly Lowry's 2016 nonfiction book, Who Killed These Girls? Cold Case, The Yogurt Shop Murders. Corey Mitchell's 2016 nonfiction book, Murdered Innocents, and the novel See How Small by Scott Blackwood were all referenced, or all were all books that were talking about this murder and stuff. So if any of you good book readers out there, those 3 books are actually really good books. I've read one of them, Who Killed These Girls. It's really, really good book. It really goes into detail, and not just from the perspective of investigators, but also the perspectives of the victims' families and stuff, which coincidentally are also very much involved in it. They've been doing tip raisers, fundraisers and things, trying to gather tips and information, and trying to keep the memory of all 4 girls alive, and keep it in the media, and keep it, people knowing about it, and trying to say, hey, this needs to be solved, trying to bring justice to their lost family members. With the case remaining unsolved, last year, Republican Representative Michael McCall of Texas, cited the yogurt shop murders, and he helped legislation, the Homicide Family Victims Right, which we just talked about a second ago. He actually helped bring that apart, saying, hey, we need something better. Allowing for federal to review and complete investigations of a case that has been gone cold for at least 3 years. As part of that process, the case files are updated with new technologies and to reassess evidence. Which that part I think is awesome, that they're going back, because some of these cold cases, I've looked at myself, and I'm doing research for this show. I've looked at, and I'm like, why hasn't this been run? This was 1985 or 1979 or whatever. The technology was so different then than it is now, and so much better now, obviously. Then I'm like, why hasn't this been reevaluated or relooked at, and why hasn't this been rerun? I mean, you got that there. So, it is what it is. But so I guess part of that I agree with is that they're doing this to get get the notice out there. Amy's own family have worked to give her memory of a life of its own. Amy's older brother, Sean Ayers, and his wife, Angie, helped start the Texas Attorney General's Cold Case and Missing Persons Advisory Committee. Again, like I had said, the Attorney General has their own cold case unit, and Sean and his wife, Angie, actually help run it and stuff. I've actually spoken to Angie, not realizing that she was part of this case. So, on an unrelated case. But, they're trying to push forward, trying to get these things out there so that they can be cases like Sean's sister and other ones can be solved and reevaluated and looked at. And the newer, updated technologies can be used when investigating. But they're trying to push forward, growing the percentage of cold cases and murders across the country that might otherwise fall through the cracks. They're trying to make that percentage bigger and trying to get these solved. And trying to basically say to the families, as well as their own families that were lost, they're not forgotten, as you said, of the girls, and we're not giving up on them. And neither has the city of Austin, and neither has the Austin Police Department. Everybody is still working on it. FBI is still very active on it. We're all trying to bring justice to the family and to these girls. And it's a continuing thing, and it will be a continuing thing until we can bring the perpetrators who did this crime to justice. So, again, we thank you for listening and taking this journey with us as we delved into the Austin Yogurt Shop murder case. It is a very gruesome one. It's a very dark one. It's a very sad one. And hopefully, by us bringing this, to the table, that maybe somebody out there, maybe you listening, may have the answer, may have seen something, or may have not realized that they've seen something. But any tip, anything you have, please bring it forward. Any little bit helps. Again, if you have any tips or information about the murders or those killed, or those who killed these young girls, please call the numbers that are listed below in the description below. I've listed all the numbers and all the information and all the individuals who are involved in the case. So please contact them. Again, remember, you can call and give information and tips anonymously. Every tip and every bit of information can lead us closer in finding closure for the families. Bring those guilty of taking these young girls' lives to justice. So if you know anything at all, please call. It's not too late. It really isn't. So, but next time, we have another riveting case for you, and this is the bizarre disappearance of Jason Landry. This is one that Barb and I have actually investigated personally. We've actually been to the site where his vehicle was last seen. We've been actually exclusively investigating this on our own. And so this one is just, to me, and I'm probably to you as well, just the whole situation is bizarre, and we'll get into that next time. But it's the disappearance of Jason Landry. He was a Texas State College student on his way home to celebrate the holidays with his family when he disappeared in Luling, Texas, or on the outskirts of Luling, Texas, never to be seen again. And coincidentally, another Texas college student named Caleb Harris also disappeared, and may have a possible correlation with that of Jason's disappearance, because they were both college students, both going home, and both disappeared around the same area. But more on all this next time. We're going to delve into that and maybe bring some light to their cases. And I hope that today's case will have brought light to the Yogurt Shop murders and get that back out there. And maybe somebody out there who's listening and watching this may know something. Hopefully. Yeah. So as always, we thank you for your support. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. If you have any cases you want us to look at or cover from your part of the world or country, please comment below, and please mention if we're allowed to use your name or handle if we choose to use your story. Like you've seen here today, my niece, asked us to do the Yogurt Shop murders, and we did it. So to show you that we will do it, we do look at the comments, and we do take each and every one of them seriously, and we do look at the victims and the victims' families when we're doing these cases. So please, if you have anything, please bring it forward. We're more than happy to take a look and see what we can do. That is all that we have for you today. Our next episode, again, is about Jason Landry and Caleb Harris, which will drop in about 2 weeks, give or take, and stuff. Again, if you also, just another little tidbit, if you want more information on the yogurt shop murders, you can actually go onto Google and type in Austin yogurt shop murders, and there are a lot of news articles from varying news sources down here in Texas, KXAN, KView, as well as People Magazine, and some more national type journalism places. So please dig into it. If you know something, again, please comment, please talk to us, please call the numbers below. Any tip can help. But please, everyone, again, as we both, Barb and I, agree, stay safe out there. Remember to be observant of your surroundings and those around you. You never know what's lurking in the shadows. So please stay safe out there and take care. And until next time, this is Juliana,
Barb,
signing off. Take care, everybody.
bye.
Bye.